Hi, everyone. I'm Gary Summers, and welcome to the audio edition of Mind, Body, Soul. I have another interesting guest today again. Welcome, Andrew Ovens.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Andrew, so I know you have a podcast called Clearly Cathartic, but
Mhm.
before we start, can you tell us a little bit about what you do and what listeners can expect to hear from you today?
Sure, absolutely. So I am a teacher. I've been an educator for over a dozen years now. Um, I became a teacher specifically to help students get through awkward social situations in their early teen years. I had a bit of a rough time in high school, and being a compassionate person, that was one of the things that drove me to teaching. So, what listeners can expect to hear today is how my interest and personal experiences in mental health, tied with my experience as a teacher, have led me to create a podcast, Clearly Cathartic, Disempowering the Shame of Mental Illness, to further the conversation and hopefully give listeners a bit of catharsis.
Okay, so I guess the question is why Clearly Cathartic, Disempowering the Shame of Mental Illness is the title.
Yeah, for two reasons. The title is that long. First of all, it actually did start as a cathartic exercise for myself, and it seemed appropriate to name it what it actually was. And the second part, disempowering the shame of mental illness, as somebody who has lived with mental illness for most of my life, it's important to me that people take it as something serious that is worth talking about, and the more that we do talk about it, the less stigma there will be.
And I've listened to a few of your podcasts, and it's very personal
Yes.
in nature. You certainly don't shy away from sharing your own experiences.
Yeah.
Um, and I know we want to take the cloak off of mental illness, and we want people to not be ashamed by mental illness. You walk around with a cast on your leg, people know you have a broken leg or you have something wrong with your leg, but people who walk around with mental illness don't seem to want to talk about it. But you've taken that cloak off totally, haven't you?
Certainly have. It was a bit of a challenge, the decision making process of whether I actually wanted to be this personal with my anecdotes. But once I made the decision, once I decided, okay, this is what works, this is what students are telling me they would like to hear, it became easy because I have heard from so many students that the personal nature of the show, which really is based on mental health talks that I would give in the classroom, um, that is what connects them to themselves. Almost, they feel like they're not the only ones going through it. And as a young person, I definitely did feel like I was the only one going through it, and that there were no support. So coming out with this extremely personal, yet slightly hopeful podcast, I think is going to reach some people in a way that a textbook or a PowerPoint presentation might not.
And naturally, I do a fair bit of speaking at conventions and that, and people love stories. People like to hear about your experiences, and people like to know that they're not alone, especially when, you know, people don't like to talk about mental illness. And when you don't talk about it and you don't share it, you feel as possibly you could be alone. So I guess my next question is, uh, do you share everything? Is there more to your stories that you share than you leave out? Like when someone writes a novel, an autobiography or something, they share all their information. But, when you get into mental health, you're really starting to walk a very fine line in that area, correct? So where did you, did you draw the line, or is everything open?
So, in the interest of full disclosure, being tempered with making sure I don't share too much about people who are not me, no, I do not actually share everything. one of the things that teachers get good at doing over the years is creating a narrative, whether it be the narrative in the classroom as you're guiding the students throughout the day, or if you're actually working on creative writing and you need to work on narratives with the students. So what I do is I create a narrative out of my experiences, but the things that change are always related to other people. So anyone who's listened to the show knows that I don't include proper names. I even sort of pull back on including names of places where I've been, or times in my life, specific times in my life, because that could identify other people in the situation. And I certainly don't want to do that, as the show is not about other people. It's about destigmatizing mental illness. So with that being said, it is everything that I share is completely true, but I do remove details here and there just to protect other people who may not have an interest in having such personal details shared with the world.
So here's a question right off the cuff. Are you an open book?
Am I an open book? Well, I think I am. It's very hard for me to hide my emotions and to keep things to myself. One of the episodes on ADHD goes into that. If you have lived with someone with ADHD or have it yourself, then you know what I'm talking about. It's very hard to hold your emotions,
Yeah.
and not wear them on your sleeve.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm always an open book. I have learned to be appropriate when needed, but yeah, no, what you see is what you get with me.
And I think it's so important because I remember reading somewhere, the first 30 seconds that you meet someone, you probably got a pretty good idea of that type of person. And I think in your line and what you want to do is, certainly as a teacher, I taught for a number of years myself. So you have to portray a person who's authentic.
Mm.
And I think that's probably the most important aspect, particularly, I guess, in yourself where you're dealing with mental illness, correct?
Yeah, you've hit the nail right on the head there. If it's not authentic, then it gets lost in the noise. And with the subject of mental illness, as we've discussed and as most people know, people don't want to talk about it. So if you're not being different in the world with so many different media options coming at everyone, then you're not going to help anybody, because no one's going to find you, no one's going to hear you, and if they do hear you, it's just another rambling voice in the background.
And you're today's news. You're here today and you're gone tomorrow.
Pretty
Um,
much. Yeah.
what are your own self-care strategies?
Well, so my self-care strategies tend to be a mix of proactive and reactive. I actually do fall more onto the reactive side of things, even with my self-care strategies, because I found that that's what works for me over the years. So I guess the number one thing that I would say is the self-care strategy that is integral to any sort of self-care is acceptance. Acceptance of who you are and what works for you, what your needs are, within reason, and obviously not infringing on anybody else's needs most of the time if possible.
Yeah.
So I've accepted that I need to monitor myself, sort of watch myself, pay attention to physical signs, increased heart rate, sweating, confusion when I get anxious and I don't know I'm anxious. Quite often I'm confused first because I've lost that critical thinking ability. And when I notice those things, then I can separate myself away from the situation. I can try a quick meditation or some square breathing, breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, etc. A lot of the little tricks I picked up along the way just come back to me accepting that this is how I feel at this moment, and I'm going to help myself.
You mentioned two words, which I think are really, really important. And I think probably the hardest, and I've been around a long time, the hardest life skill for people is acceptance.
Mm.
It happens to be the fifth stage of adversity. If you go through the five stages of adversity of denial and anger and bargaining and depression and acceptance, and I think that's probably one of the most difficult things to do, is accept the fact that we're all imperfect individuals living in an imperfect world.
Yeah.
And once we accept that, then we're okay with our weaknesses. You know, we're okay with having trouble, because everybody has trouble with things, but we play to our strengths. The other thing I think that was important that you talked about was to be able to be self-aware of when you're starting to fall in that hole,
Mm.
and then to be able to have a plan in place, which is a distraction to take you away from, hitting that panic button and having all kinds of issues. So I think those are two very important points when you talk about self-care. And any other things that you do?
So something that I know works for me and falls more on the proactive side instead of reactive, but is still extremely hard for me to do. And anybody listening to this knows that, or if you've listened to my podcast and you're listening to this, then you know that I have no problem sharing my faults, is exercise. I used to enjoy running. I still do enjoy it when I get out there, but making myself physically leave the house can be quite difficult at times. Um, but when I know I'm feeling well enough and I guess safe enough in my own mind to physically leave the house and go for a run, I know that does help me for a good day or two afterwards.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's and 'cause some people will say, you need to set a time.
Sure.
You need to go Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at a certain time. So when you're regimented like that, it's
Mhm.
great. But when you throw a mental illness into the package, then 5 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon may not suit
Yeah,
you when you're going through an issue that you need to deal with rather than getting outside and going for a run, correct?
that's
So
right. That's right.
flexibility is very important in self-care as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that ties right in with what we said already about acceptance.
Yeah.
Acceptance takes many different forms.
Yeah. Any other things you do for self-care?
Yeah, I enjoy a lot of quiet time personally. I have a very rich inner life, and trying to block that out by um, paying attention to the outside world is necessary for life and a career and so on. But I also know that I need that time in my mind, and I am much more confident in ensuring in asking whoever I'm around, whether it be family members or my partner, if it's appropriate for me to have that time or to schedule a time when it is Andrew time. Because without that, I will fall apart without understanding why. I think, yeah, because I hadn't been able to reflect on enough
Sure.
to be able to figure it out.
Yeah, and I think I think the term you used was rich inner time. And I
Yeah.
think sometimes, when we do have that inner time and we start to talk to ourselves, we have to be very careful how we talk to ourselves, because we seem to hold ourselves to a higher standard than we would other people.
Absolutely.
Now, 1990, well, I don't know the number, but I know it's certainly well over 90% of the people that I see, they have different issues. Could be stress, could be smoking, weight loss, whatever they come to see me about. But the number one issue that most people have is low self-esteem.
Sure. Yeah.
And for whatever reason they have it, whether they said something to themselves, had an experience that wasn't good, someone told them they were clumsy or they were not smart enough or they couldn't do this. And so, over time, that just tends to grate on people's nerves. So, I think one of the best things, if you're going to have some quiet time, is to be gentle with yourself.
Mhm.
I heard someone say, if you can't laugh at yourself, you don't know what you look like sleeping.
Yeah, that touches on the idea of how we view ourselves compared with other people. We judge ourselves based on our intentions, but we judge other people based on their actions.
Right.
So
Yeah.
if we are not aware of that and we see somebody else in pain, we will likely want to comfort them. But when we see ourselves in pain, we also then tie in um, the inner monologue that may not be so kind sometimes.
Yeah.
You should be able to get out of bed. You should be able to
Yeah.
do this. Should,
Yeah.
should, should.
Yeah.
And we forget that other people are the same as us. They have their own inner demons and so on. And so if we can be compassionate to those people, we can also be compassionate to ourselves.
Yeah. So as a teacher, Andrew, here's a question. Is the current education system doing enough to help young people deal with everyday and existential anxieties?
Yeah, this is something I've been thinking about a lot over the course of the pandemic, for sure. I think that each individual teacher has something in them that helps some student somewhere. And I do believe that most, if not all, people are fundamentally good. So if a teacher maybe is known as the strict teacher, but they're providing a level of organization and structure for students in their class that helps the students achieve their goals or even just their potential. Whether or not that teacher is seen as strict, that teacher is helping mental health in the classroom. When I have talks about mental health in the classroom or just conversations with students informally, it comes out as this kind of sharing. I'm here for you. You know, I'm a very empathetic person, and I can't really even hide that. So it's an empathetic conversation amongst students and their teacher. That's the overt way of helping mental health, but other teachers do too, in their own ways. So I think that as a whole, individual teachers are doing what they can to the best of their abilities. However, the whole system, it's stuck in, like it is locked in. It can't easily stop its own inertia and move to a completely different paradigm on mental health. So changes have been made. Changes will continue to be made, broadly speaking, in Canadian education.
Sure, yeah.
We're just maybe not as far along as we need to be.
Andrew, great conversation, and you know you're always welcome to come back and talk about any area of mental health. Can you give our listeners some advice that they can use today that can help them deal with any kind of adversity that they're going through?
Yeah, I think a good place to start for people who may be just starting or are not fully along their mental health journey yet. I guess none of us really are. It would be that idea of self-compassion. Just pay attention to how you think about yourself, speak to yourself, either internally or even externally, and try to make it a little softer. You know, like if your friend or a loved one is in pain, if they're hurting, what would you say to them in that situation? And then replace that person with yourself. It takes a lot of practice. I am, I guess, probably 23 years into my mental health journey at this point, or longer, and I still catch myself not being as kind as I can be to myself.
Yeah.
So it's going to take some time, but it definitely is worth taking that first step, and holding yourself in a nice warm hug in your mind.
Anytime I give talks, one of the talks I give is about beliefs, and when I end off, I hold up a $10 bill. It can be any denomination, but I hold up a $10 bill and I ask people, what's the value of that $10 bill? And I say it's not a trick question, just they say $10. So I crumple it up in my hand. And I say, and what's the value of it now? They say $10. So I throw it on the floor and I jump on it and jump on it and jump on it. And I crumple it up again. I say, what's the value of that $10 bill now? They said $10. I said, exactly. See, it doesn't matter what I did to the $10 bill. It doesn't matter what happened to it. It retains the same value that it had when it was made. And that goes the same for every single human being on earth. It's irrelevant what happens to you. It's irrelevant what people said to you. You still retain the same value that you had when you were born. So don't waste it.
Yes, absolutely.
Andrew, thanks very much. It's been a great conversation. Thank you for taking the time out of your day, and hopefully I'll get you back and we can get into some more topics besides your podcast. Again, thanks very much.
Well, thank you.
That's it for this week, everybody. I'll be back next week with another interesting guest. Bye bye for now.